Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're taking a step back and looking at the current pro wrestling landscape through totally fresh, unbiased eyes. We're talking completely stripped of the intense tribalism, the endless internet rumors, and all that exhausting backstage politics. We're stepping into the shoes of a casual fan who just organically dropped in on an episode of AEW Dynamite, purely to see what all the fuss was about. And their reaction? It wasn't just a polite nod. It was an absolute, fundamental reawakening of their love for the sport. It's super fascinating because seeing this world without any preconceived notions reveals some really stark, undeniable contrasts in how modern wrestling is presented today. So let's dive into this wildly passionate, unfiltered perspective and discover exactly why a casual drop-in turned into such a massive revelation. Listen to this quote. This is levels above Raw, levels above WrestleMania. This is what we need from the WWE. I mean, wow. That is a massive, explosive claim. This casual fan didn't just kinda enjoy a couple of cool flips or a decent storyline. They explicitly stated that a standard weekly free TV episode of AEW Dynamite felt vastly superior to a multi-million-dollar, heavily funded premium live event from the biggest wrestling conglomerate on the planet. They were absolutely blown away. But why? What actually triggers that kind of visceral reaction from someone who isn't even fully caught up on the storylines? How does a random Wednesday night broadcast completely eclipse the so-called grandest stage of them all? Well, that's exactly the puzzle we're going to piece together for you today.
To solve this, we're breaking things down into 6 key areas. Number 1, a casual fan's discovery. 2, in-ring intensity and athleticism. 3, authentic characters versus generic archetypes. 4, corporate control versus creative freedom. 5, passion and physical dedication. And finally, number 6, the final viewer verdict.
All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, a casual fan's discovery, where nostalgia meets modern action. So, stepping into this casual viewer's shoes, turning on AEW felt like hopping in a time machine straight back to the ruthless aggression era. For a fresh set of eyes, modern wrestling can honestly sometimes feel like a slow, heavily produced corporate board meeting. But this felt like pure, unadulterated adrenaline. It was just a massive jolt of unpredictable, action-packed energy from start to finish. From a casual perspective, it instantly brought back memories of the days when a show would kick off with heavy hitters like Batista, The Undertaker, or Edge just brawling right out of the gate. You didn't tune in to hear a heavily scripted monologue. You tuned in for a fight. This fresh experience perfectly captured that exact same lightning in a bottle. It wasn't about sitting around for an hour waiting for the wrestling to happen. It was an immediate, immersive rush that grabs you by the collar and just refuses to let go.
And that brings us perfectly to Section 2, in-ring intensity and athleticism. Let's look at how the show actually kicked off.
The way this opening match between MJF and Rush was paced is genuinely mind-blowing for a free TV broadcast. Right at minute 1, you've got MJF walking out dressed like an actual matador, playing these deeply psychological mind games with his opponent. It's ridiculous, it's theatrical, but man, it completely works to hook a casual viewer instantly. Then, the intensity just ratchets up. By minute 15, these elite athletes are violently crashing through barricades and smashing through tables at ringside. And just when you think they're going to wrap it up for a commercial break, nope, they keep going. By minute 30, it hits this wildly unpredictable climax where Rush actually headbutts the referee just to keep the match going after MJF fakes an injury. Looking at this through the eyes of a casual fan, this doesn't feel like a throwaway TV opener at all. This feels like a high-stakes, main-event thriller that leaves you completely breathless before the first hour is even over.
This brilliantly highlights a major frustration with the modern wrestling formula. On one side of the fence, you have an ecosystem that delivers high-stakes, deeply unpredictable, 35-minute physical bangers right at the very top of the broadcast. You tune in and you are instantly rewarded. On the other side, you've got the standard corporate formula, a slow, highly repetitive build-up where a top guy like Cody Rhodes or Seth Rollins walks to the ring in a fancy suit just to talk for 20 minutes. From a casual perspective, that formulaic booking feels incredibly stale. Every single match setup feels identical, almost like they're just checking boxes on a corporate spreadsheet. The stark contrast here is that one brand demands your attention with constant, high-energy physical storytelling from the opening bell, while the other makes you patiently wait around for the action to slowly materialize.
Let's move along to Section 3, authentic characters versus generic archetypes. This is where the gap in sheer personality really jumps out at you. Looking through the lens of a fresh viewer, the gap in character presentation between the two brands is absolutely staggering. Take Andrade, for example. In one highly controlled ecosystem, he was largely viewed as just a mid-card guy who supposedly couldn't talk or connect with the crowd. But viewed here, in a creatively free environment, he looks like $1,000,000. He oozes pure charisma, confidently kissing girls in the crowd, starching his opponent, and completely owning the microphone. The transformation is just stunning. Then you have someone like Lio Rush. A casual viewer is immediately captivated by his bizarre black heart persona, kicking out of a pinfall while literally spitting black ink from his mouth. I mean, it's incredibly weird, it's highly polarizing, but most importantly, it is impossibly captivating. These aren't just guys in wrestling gear, they are fully realized, unrestrained characters. And then we have Mark Briscoe. The reviewer perfectly dubbed him the Trailer Park Uso. When Briscoe first comes out, a fresh viewer might be a little skeptical of his unpolished, missing teeth, genuinely scrappy look. He definitely doesn't look like a magazine cover model. He then proceeds to deliver this sprawling, rambling 10-minute promo. But here's the magic. Even if it dragged on a tiny bit, it completely wins you over. Why? Because the heart and the soul behind his words are totally palpable. It isn't a slick, focus-tested, polished corporate script handed to him by a team of 20 writers. It's a real, gritty, heartfelt delivery from a genuine underdog. To a casual fan, that pure, unpolished passion behind the microphone feels incredibly authentic and deeply refreshing. Now, contrast that authentic grit with the rigid corporate archetypes we so often see on the other side. This fresh perspective powerfully argues that the WWE ecosystem forces its massive talent pool into 4 very stale, highly predictable boxes. You've got the goth, like Damian Priest and Rhea Ripley. You've got the brute, seen in guys like Rusev or Obafemi. The white meat babyface, perfectly embodied by Cody Rhodes or Sami Zayn. And finally, the cocky persona, used for Trick Williams and Carmelo Hayes. When you step back and really look at it, this heavily controlled, repetitive formula severely stifles true character diversity. It totally lacks the wild, unpredictable, and entirely diverse personalities that make a wrestling roster feel like a living, breathing universe, rather than just a collection of manufactured action figures. Which brings us beautifully into Section 4, Corporate Control versus Creative Freedom, looking at management and storytelling. This is a fascinating look at the stark difference in backstage philosophies. On the side of creative freedom, everything simply feels unforced. The segments flow naturally into one another, totally driven by the talent's sheer passion to go out and perform at the highest level. You can literally feel the wrestlers heavily influencing their own stories. On the corporate side, the critique of a doctored product is incredibly harsh but completely eye-opening from a casual viewpoint. It feels like a highly controlled TKO agenda, where the production has actually become remarkably lazy. For example, using the exact same massive LED screen setups for entirely different premium events, like Backlash and regular Friday Night SmackDown. When everything looks identical and everything feels meticulously micromanaged, it strips away the unique, immersive details that historically made professional wrestling feel so deeply special and unpredictable. Now, this is where our casual fan drops a truly bold, show-stopping claim. Don Callis versus Paul Heyman. To a hardcore wrestling purist, comparing literally anyone to Paul Heyman is almost considered sacrilege, right? But from a completely fresh perspective, the dynamic looks totally different. Don Callis is seen out there actively managing a massive, diverse stable of wrestlers, dynamically keeping the stories fresh and compelling for half the roster on any given night. Meanwhile, the legacy competition is critiqued for largely failing to elevate new talent, relying way too heavily on old equity and nostalgic reputation rather than driving current, active, creative ingenuity. It's a massive testament to how effective on-screen management can be when it's fully integrated into the creative freedom of the broader show.
Let's move to Section 5, focusing on passion and physical dedication, and the immense physical toll this sport demands.
A fresh viewing naturally leads to a very compelling rhetorical question. Why exactly are these highly paid stars taking such massive physical risks on free television? Think about someone like MJF. He's a top-tier star, presumably making millions of dollars, yet he is out there putting his body on the line, willingly going through tables, and wrestling absolute 35-minute physical marathons on a random Wednesday. What exactly drives that relentless level of sacrifice when they could just easily play it safe? Well, it really comes down to treating this industry like a legitimate, grueling sport versus treating it like a Hollywood charade. This casual perspective views the AEW roster as real Major League athletes. They're showcasing elite cardio, deep physical dedication, and a willingness to push their bodies to the absolute limit for the sake of the audience. Meanwhile, the competition faces a pretty brutal critique. They are viewed as a roster largely coasting on massive, guaranteed salaries. The perception is that they're wrestling a hyper-safe, heavily restricted style simply to avoid concussions, avoid CTE, and go home uninjured. Now, wanting to stay healthy is completely logical, for sure, but in the eyes of a casual fan seeking entertainment, one brand feels like a spectacular, high-stakes professional sport, while the other feels like a heavily protected, overly cautious corporate gig where no one really wants to break a sweat. But here's the absolute ultimate irony. Despite that heavily controlled, famously safe, in-ring corporate style, stars under the massive WWE umbrella like Braun Breaker, Bronson Reed, and Logan Paul are still getting injured. Stepping back as a casual viewer, this is attributed directly to a fundamental lack of genuine in-ring physical conditioning. Because these wrestlers aren't consistently pushing their cardio to the absolute brink in grueling 35-minute bangers, their bodies actually aren't as physically hardened or prepared for the sudden, violent rigors of the ring. So, ironically, trying to play it safe under a heavily controlled corporate umbrella might actually be leaving these athletes less conditioned and consequently far more prone to injury than the talent literally throwing themselves through barricades on the other channel. Which naturally brings us to our final section, the final viewer verdict. After all of this intense analysis, where did our casual viewer land? Let's score the experience.
They landed on a remarkably strong 8 out of 10. And let's actually put that into perspective for a second. For a viewer who dropped in completely out of the loop on current feuds, ignorant of the complex months-long story arcs, and totally blind to the internet gossip, that is a massive, undeniable victory. It proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that sheer passion, raw, jaw-dropping athleticism, and genuine in-ring unpredictability can completely transcend the need for perfectly polished backstories. The show was so inherently thrilling that the viewer was openly asking for recommendations to watch even more programming. They were completely converted by the sheer energy of what they had just witnessed.
So we're going to leave you with this final provocative thought to chew on. Is professional wrestling finally getting its soul back? Well, if this casual fan's organic, wildly passionate reaction is any indication, the answer might just be yes. The unpolished grit, the untethered creative freedom, and the high-risk athletic passion we've explored today might be the exact antidote to the stale corporate formula that has dominated our screens for far too long. It's a brilliant, refreshing perspective on the modern landscape of the sport. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll see you on the next explainer.